What a macabre souvenir.
I can't believe this story you're telling me. It's macabre.
I hate whiskey.
Call of Cthulhu is an adventure horror game. You play as a grizzled alcoholic detective sent out to a mysterious coastal town to find out what's going on. Hang on. Haven't I played this already? Well, some things are similar, but a lot more is different. Dark Corners of the Earth is a first-person shooter, and this is... wait. Okay, there is some shooting. A little bit. But it's not an FPS, it's an RPG. Sort of? Let me just start over. So you play as a man named William Pierce, a private eye and traumatized World War I veteran. He's met by a man who wishes for Pierce to investigate the death of his daughter. Her name was Sarah Hawkins, and she was a famous painter. Unfortunately, she and her entire family died in a tragic house fire. But there was always something strange about her paintings, and they only got stranger before her demise. Her father finds the house fire to be suspicious, so Pierce ventures out to the obscure island of Darkwater to find out the truth. It's an intriguing setup for a mystery. Things are kept vague enough that you're still not sure what to expect yet. Unfortunately, this doesn't last too long. If you're even remotely familiar with Lovecraft's more popular stories, when you get to Darkwater, you'll pick up on some things. You can take broad guesses and be right about most of them. I'll talk more about the story later, but save the spoilers for the end. For now, I'll just say there is some excellent writing and attention to detail and some good reveals. At the same time, other parts are a mess or just plain awkward or horribly familiar. It is worth mentioning that it's not just Dark Corners of the Earth again. That game was more Shadow over Innsmouth than the Call of Cthulhu book anyway. I guess it did have some of the RPG elements sprinkled here and there. The 2018 Call of Cthulhu, the official video game, that's the long title, takes bits out of just about all Lovecraft media, so it's a big incestuous squid lasagna. Now that I think about it, Lovecraft did have some incest in his writing, so that's appropriate. Also, there's way more of the role-playing game in here, we'll talk about that too. So let's take a good look at Call of Cthulhu.
Where's the proof?
We're the proof. Without it, the whole of Darkwater would have died of hunger in 1847.
Okay, it's a rough-looking game, especially for 2018, but there's more to that. The more I play of relatively newer games, the more I notice post-processing effects. The worst of these seem to be Unreal 4 games, and Call of Cthulhu is no exception. So let me go through everything I can perceive. It might be hard to see on YouTube, but like Dark Corners of the Earth, there's a slight film grain effect. So that fuzzes things out, but we have chromatic aberration on top of that, so the image is distorted too. Then you have depth of field to distort things even more, your motion blur, then finally your green filter. This is a very green game. Now when you put all those together, the game looks awful. It's more blurry and out of focus than gay characters in a Disney Star Wars product. I can't even say it reminds me of Morrowind this time because Morrowind's not blurry. Now the only one of these you can turn off directly is motion blur. For everything else, you need to dig around in the engine. I experimented a lot with this, and unfortunately some settings are just tied together. So ultimately I just forced chromatic aberration off. I don't want every setting off, but altogether it's just too much. I also ended up turning the brightness way down. You know how games go, turn it down until you could barely see the logo, and you're like, how barely is barely? Well, Call of Cthulhu really means barely. It's not a sharp-looking game, and maybe all those effects are trying to obfuscate that. But it's still ridiculous not to have an easy checkbox for some of these. You know, I wouldn't want to take away your color filter. A lot of scenes and art assets are clearly designed with that being there, but the effects that constantly degrade and fuzz the image don't seem that way. I think this is a growing pet peeve of mine. Because sure, these effects could make sense for an insanity sequence, but my eyeballs usually don't act like cameras. Beyond that, there is some great scenery in Call of Cthulhu. There are some excellent lighting effects, and the game does use its color palette in unusual ways. Having such a focus on green is unique, and they properly use the colors under that to make some surreal visuals. It's not like that the whole time though, they do mix things up. You do get scenes of relative normalcy to balance out all the weird squid stuff, and creepy things will still happen in areas not covered in green, so they don't rely on the color as a "this is the scary part" filter. This art gallery is full of unsettling pieces. You have the screaming face paintings, the Tomb King constructs, Aslan, it's all here. No, it's not AAA as far as fidelity goes, and yeah, a lot of the game looks horribly ugly, but the art direction is good and unusual enough to punch above its weight sometimes. The worst part, or maybe the most unintentionally uncomfortable part, are the character models. They're right in that uncanny valley where they're realistic enough where your brain tries to see them as like actual human beings, but still look just a little too plasticky. Combine that with their movement being too janky. So my brain doesn't register human being, it registers animatronic. In particular, the one at Chuck E. Cheese that definitely bit me when I was 6. There are exceptions, but generally it's pretty rough. It is poor looking when you're aiming as high as realism in 2018, but as far as a mid-range game goes, it's not too bad. Especially on the lower budget horror game scale. Oddly enough, I find the pre-rendered cutscenes to be the ugliest part of the game by far. In theory, they're supposed to look better than the actual game does, but not here. You might be able to tell just from watching this, but it also has some of the worst lip syncing I've seen in a game in maybe a decade. Older games could get away with having rah 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 was because you had more primitive and abstract graphics. With all the detail here, it's blatantly noticeable.
Tell me if this is the work of madness. Or if, on the contrary, you manage to detect some logic, a rationality to follow so that I may understand it.
Is that all you want from me?
Yes, please.
All right. I'll look at your picture.
While the visuals aren't AAA quality, I'd say that the audio is. The mixing has occasional issues, but the actual voice acting and direction is excellent, and it's all being backed up by a solid soundscape.
Killer whales don't have many known predators.
That's true. And normally, they're not found around here. But, you're gonna take me for a fool.
Give it a try.
Have you heard about the depths? Trenches that plunge into the earth, and that shelter creatures unlike any other.
You're talking about mythology.
Ha! Indeed, you're right.
The Book of Zion is the foundational work behind Helena Blavatsky's Theosophical movement. Its followers place truth on the same footing as a religion.
I don't want to spoil the supernatural or intense sequences, but what's here is excellent. You'll still get some awkward deliveries of lines. Sometimes Pierce will say one thing, then the next sounds like it was recorded on a different day or in a different room, but compared to the quality of the rest of the work, it's pretty minor. The soundtrack is competent, well-done ambience and droning sounds, strange chanting, strings, everything you'd expect from a Lovecraft title. It is appropriate and thematic, but most isn't very memorable. There are some standouts, like a track with a creepy ethereal woman singing. Even some of the downtime music is somber or bittersweet. Genuinely gorgeous music. You know, beyond. Gotta say though, it does ramp up. So overall a wide gap in presentation highs and lows. Moving on to the gameplay, why is there a squid and why is it cake? As Detective Pierce, you have some options for how you handle the case. There are choices to make and skills to use, and this is a game with multiple endings. There is some variety as far as gameplay goes, so I'll try to tackle it one element at a time. I'd say your primary activity is mainly digging around for clues. Some will be as simple as an object you go up and click on and collect, others will be a little more complicated. Some clues require going through a wide variety of puzzles, getting past enemies, or having a proper skill. A lot of obstacles typically have a few ways of getting past them. For example, this hidden bookshelf door. You can study some clues and find the way to open it properly, test your muscles and try to force the mechanism, or poke around until you find a crowbar to pop the thing. Good ideas so far, so how do the skills work? Well, you're allocated character points at the very beginning and you can put them wherever you want. The initial choice is important. It's a fact of life. The more creepy people you investigate, the more CP you find. So as you play the game and get more clues and get closer to discovering the truth, you get more character points. You can't max everything out in one playthrough. And two of the skills, occultism and medicine, can't be upgraded conventionally. You get these up by finding relevant items in the environment, so the very start is the only opportunity to put things in directly. Occultism in particular is a tricky one, because the more you learn about forbidden knowledge beyond the colors of time, the worse it is for your mental health. You do learn a lot poking around unholy books, but it does start to rot your brain. How intact your mind is that you can't chalk up to alcohol will help determine your ending. So if you decide to be willfully ignorant, you might have a happier time.
I can't read Latin.
Your other skills help you break through obstacles and give you more conversation options, but can also aid in Pierce's special ability. Using his detective magic, he can sometimes recreate past events. An example, a skill like psychology could help him deduce a motive or think of what an object might represent to somebody. So in theory, when you replay the game with a different build, you might not just get a different ending, but also new insights along the way. What was just a weird object to Dr. Pierce could be significant for Occult Pierce. This also changes how you progress through the game. Let's compare my Nerd Pierce with my Gains Pierce. Nerd Pierce breaks into a warehouse by bribing people with alcohol to cause a distraction. To do that, he had to use an investigation skill to lockpick his way into a shed and steal alcohol. It's prohibition after all. Meanwhile, Gaines Pierce assembled a bunch of items to fix a gate winch. His brute force can then easily...
Damn, I broke it.
Okay, that didn't work, but he can beat up the people who confront him about it. Even if I went back with Nerd Pierce, he'd never be able to open the... Wait, he has less strength. How did he open the gate? Oh no. Increases your chances of... Increases your chances of... That's right. Every skill is a dice roll. This is the worst possible idea for this kind of game, and this isn't the most egregious example. Sometimes a little icon pops up saying hidden items are nearby. When you find them all, it'll vanish, so you know you got everything. So does the spot hidden skill means that icon pops up or that you can see the item from farther? No. Naturally, you have more insight in the subject matter, but you'll also find more clues. Because improving the skill increases your chances of finding hidden objects. An undiscovered object will not appear in-game. What? So finding more clues is based on a skill that's still a dice roll. You'd think that grayed out conversation options means it's a threshold, but no, that just means that you can test the skill. So if you play the game again with a new build, you can still be failing the exact same things your other character did, because ultimately it's all up to chance. Does maxing out a skill guarantee success? I have no idea. But we're now playing a mystery game where finding some clues is up to RNG. I don't understand the logic behind this. The random element doesn't make the game more replayable for me, it does the opposite. Even if a max skill guarantees success, that means I need to be min-maxing every playthrough. And leading up to that, all the skill checks are up to chance. That kind of thing makes sense for combat in a role-playing game, a video game. In a tabletop setting it works because you're being monitored by a DM. They can adjust and monitor things on the fly to keep everything clear. Random numbers don't do that. You can still understand the broad strokes of the game without these hidden clues, but it's baffling. Especially when you look at the skill tree itself. The fact that the investigation skill is dead center, so you have two separate skills that are supremely important for understanding what's happening, and it's RNG. It's not a huge game either, your first playthrough might be between 6 to 9 hours. Also, you sometimes play as other characters who have their own set skills. And they can also recreate crime scenes, which makes it extra weird when the game established that doing that was kind of Pierce's thing. It's a good idea, but the skill system execution is a nightmare. I did replay this game a few times, and the dialogue options in particular had very little consequence most of the time. There's too little in the game for the skill system to work off of. In a longer, richer game, I could see how it would work if the RNG was removed, but as is, the options it offers feel too redundant. Being friendly with a cop and failing to threaten a cop have the exact same outcome. It's nice window dressing for a playthrough, but don't think playing it again will be much different. Do you want to pull a gas lever or an electrical lever? I don't know, they're right next to each other. The game did switch developers at some point, and the original went on to make their own Cthulhu game, so maybe that could explain some things. So it is messy on that front. How about the stealth mechanics?
Hey!
It's bad. More funny than tense. What is he doing? I don't know what that was. I'm not going to show the monster yet, but it has the same problems. The AI is near brain dead and completely forgets about you once you're out of line of sight. On top of that, there are mechanics that just seem unfinished. If your sanity got too low in dark corners of the earth, that meant the end of you. Games like Amnesia could just distort the screen or have unpleasant effects. In Call of Cthulhu, if you hide in a locker too long or see unsettling things, it'll look like something bad will happen. The screen distorts, there's a heartbeat, heavy breathing, your vision narrows. But you're never in any danger even though the game seems to imply that. You pop out of the situation and a few seconds later your vision's back to normal. There's a sequence near the beginning where Pierce has an uncomfortably realistic panic attack. The rapid, subtle breathing and not the Hollywood fish gasping. You're outright told that this is a danger and if this happens, you need to get out. So what if I told you that it never ever happens again in the game? Even in the sequence itself it's pointless, but I could see how it would work. You start making noise and are easier to find, or maybe you collapse and something can get you, but nothing happens. It's a warning for a meaningless feature that never returns. As for the FPS gameplay, it's just clicking. A shot hitting depends on your strength skill and RNG. But really you don't need to hide or shoot because you can easily outrun everybody, which also includes the interdimensional monsters. So for all the mood and atmosphere it tried to build, I wasn't really that tense playing it and I never got scared. That's not bragging, I've been creeped out by plenty of games. It would even fail at jump scares. It would just play a loud clang right before the scary thing actually happened, so I was just alerted to it. They weren't polished up. The absolute worst part is when they use the cutscenes. The most tense and promising part of the game for me was exploring the Hawkins Manor. It's near the beginning of the game, it's quiet and dark, and you just keep finding signs of something awful that happened there. Then you hear a noise near the attic, right by where you are, and you go to check it out and, oh, you just watch the scary thing happen and you're not in the situation anymore. There are even parts when the monster catches you and the UI will fade out for a few seconds before it actually shows up in pre-render form. The game has a real problem with executing and projecting its scares. The game does do some great things when you're actually playing it, and it's glimpses of what could have been. The game will occasionally do some subtle stuff to make you second guess yourself. There's just barely any of it. I'll probably remember this Wizard of Oz poster that looks like anti-Japanese World War II propaganda than I will most of the scares in the game. So before I get into spoilers, I'll talk about the story vaguely. There are three main intertwined tales. You have the original draw of Sarah Hawkins and the mystery paintings, the mysterious cult on the island, and finally, the mad scientist in his lab. The first playthrough did have some confusion to it because the game is throwing a lot at you at once, but the main details are tied together nicely. It just has some execution problems like everything else. It is competent and clearly made with reverence and love for the source material. Like a lot of other parts, I think it might have suffered from its ambition. The story seems abridged and the pacing rushed in parts. Pierce has a vision entirely about someone trying to break into a bad guy's office inside of an asylum. It's heavily guarded. Then next scene, he's just there now. Did I mention he also escaped from this asylum? Okay, if you don't want spoilers, go to here.
I pray that Colden is really here. And alive.
Darkwater is a strange town. It used to run primarily off whaling until several decades before, after an event called the Miraculous Catch. The biggest whale ever recorded was caught there, and then no whales ever returned. This was done by the father of old Captain Fitzroy, who looked a lot like him except he had a peg leg. Pierce makes friends with local officer Bradley, who brings him out to the crime scene at Hawkins Manor. This is also where I realized the game might be unfinished. You look around the grounds, then attempt to go into the manor itself.
Whoa! Whoa! You were trying to force the door, you nosy prick!
Easy, sir, all right? Put down the axe.
You know what we do with rubble like you? We gut them. Dump them into the ocean.
Well, that's no good. No axe for you.
What do you think you're doing?
Oh, that's it?
Give me that. Control yourself, old man.
Okay, let's use basic logic. Old Silas the groundskeeper has just threatened to murder you. You can try to talk him down normally, or try to grab his weapon. If you do grab his weapon, you hand it back to him in a show of strength, I guess. You're here investigating a murder of several people. He worked for the Hawkins family for many years and was hanging out in the abandoned manor long after their demise. It doesn't help that he looks like the red herring character in every Scooby-Doo episode. You have less than zero reason to trust this man. Beyond that, this is a guy you should be asking tons and tons of questions to. He was with the family forever, he would know who their enemies could be or what could have happened. Instead of being a gigantic suspect or a witness, he's just a quest to open up the manor. There's also a good chance you brought Officer Bradley with you. Even if you said no, he's at the door after this encounter anyways. You never see or hear about the groundskeeper ever again. You know, even in Scooby-Doo they'll go, I bet Old Man Jenkins is behind this, but they don't even do that. Why have a throwaway character in such a relevant role to the story? This is also where I started to notice the shortcomings and what you can actually investigate. You can check out random books on a table, but not the giant scratches outside an evil summoning circle room. They're not hidden objects, these are obvious clues. One of the iffy voice direction things I mentioned earlier pops up beneath the house. You've been attacked by a mysterious intruder and are finding signs of a secret cult. There are artifacts and images left over from an ancient tribe that disappeared from the island. Pierce studies the images.
This monstrous creature must be an allegory. These paintings must be several centuries old. These people lying down, are they dead? Are they asleep?
That freaked him out. How about the human skeleton?
Sad way to go.
The crime was a long time ago, that could be evidence. I guess it sticks out because he focuses on stuff that the player would be knowing about. If you have this game, you know the supernatural stuff is real. I guess you could interpret that he gets a bad feeling from it because it's influencing his dreams, but I don't know. All the investigating up to this point just comes across as odd.
Damn, he recognized me. And it sounded like he was going to get on the level with what's going on in this joint.
Okay, it's always been this way. Another character also stops being brought up as much because it's possible you recognize his voice. You need to sneak around a mysterious ritual, not sure what's happening. I know I have been picky at things I don't like, but at this point it's still an interesting mystery. Right now you only have the cult and the paintings to deal with, along with the nonsensical skill system.
Dead? This ritual killed him.
Okay, let me get through this. You go to a place from your dreams and Charles Hawkins, the husband of Sarah, is alive and half a sushi roll. There's some fighting, an accident, and you end up in an evil asylum. As you escape, an art collector turned patient reveals the truth of Sarah Hawkins' paintings. Her latest piece is a gateway for a creature called a dimensional shambler, and that it must be stopped. So you go to his art gallery to confront it. You've only gotten whispers and glimpses about it until now. Now it's here. So it's kind of like a xenomorph. You try to hide from it in lockers and generally just sneak around. But as I said before, the AI is not very good. So to try and counter that, the level you confront it in is incredibly simple. You're actually seeing all of it right now. All you need to do is grab a weapon out of a case and go stab the painting. You don't have to hide it all actually, you can easily outrun the thing, which makes it all incredibly underwhelming. It's not a huge letdown because after the Asylum AI your expectations are tempered, but man, what an underwhelming design for a painting monster. I mean, what can I say? This is no Alien Isolation. If you guessed Sarah Hawkins was still alive, then yeah, here she is. Charles Hawkins is back from earlier too, but his tentacles are on the other side now. I honestly don't know if that's a genuine mistake or if this means something. Later on you play as Sarah Hawkins banishing the Shambler again, and it's not much better than before. I'm omitting a lot, but I realize that I don't care about anyone in the story. I guess I like Officer Bradley because he's just a nice guy trying to do the right thing, but all the characters are things you've seen a million times before. Honestly, the whole painting thing is minor in the grand scheme of things. She summoned a monster and also predicted Pierce would come to do something. The true reveal is that the miraculous catch was just bait. A creature called the Leviathan wanted to be caught. The people of Darkwater would eat his endlessly regenerating flesh and fall more and more under his influence. So that wasn't Fitzroy's father in the picture, it was Fitzroy, but his leg regenerated and he's been immortal. Good reveal. The mad scientist is trying to study the flesh to unlock the secrets of life and death and all that. Sarah's role is to help carry out the ritual that Leviathan planned, which is to summon Cthulhu. All the elements I liked in the story were setups and payoffs. Clever character moments or world-building details, but not really anyone in it themselves. It is fun to put the pieces together and go, oh, that's what that was about. But beyond that, there's not much to really linger on. It's a feeling of, oh, that's what happened. Depending on your choices in the game, you'll have 4 ending options. Enact the ritual, stop the ritual, have Sarah Hawkins kill herself, or kill yourself. The extra hard to attain endings really don't feel worth another playthrough. I hope I didn't play the game again for that. Oh, that can't be it. To make matters worse, the longest, most awesome, most thematically appropriate ending is always a choice. Appropriately, there's not an everything works out ending, so there's nothing really to work towards. You get to see Big Papa Cthulhu and all the madness he unleashes any way you play, which would make sense as a reward for doing well, but you want most of your players to be able to see this. There's some fantastic stuff in the last hour of this game, but it always feels like there was a bunch missing in the middle. At launch, this game was sold for $40, and I would have been aggravated if I bought it at that price. There is a lot of ambition and good ideas, but they're clearly not fully realized. On paper, it seems like a game I'd enjoy a lot more than Dark Corners of the Earth, but I don't think I could recommend it over that. It's a short game, and while it tries to be replayable, there's not enough there to make it worth it. I can really appreciate the effort behind Call of Cthulhu. It's not some franchise grab in name only. I know they're making a Werewolf the Apocalypse game, and I'm excited to see that. Video games have an insanely generous price-entertainment ratio. If you do get it when it's cheaper. It's a mess of ideas, and the story's characters are bland, but there is some interesting stuff there. Enough to maybe make it worth it if you like Lovecraft games. But for now, I guess Bloodborne remains king for me. I do want to play the game the original developers made, though. Maybe that'll go better. I'll see you next time. Another semi-horror game is next. I think I'm on a bit of a kick. Why do you think Lovecraft games are made poorly? Well, he figured out this video wouldn't be glowing. I don't necessarily think they're made badly. I think they have tons of ideas they start to put in, then realize the budget and the scope of what they're doing, and they have to reel it back. Seems like every Lovecraft game is going to be something much bigger. Will there be Halloween videos? Definitely, I've already started on a pretty big one. Has there ever been a game that gave you an extreme emotional response? Not extreme, but in recent memory, the end of the first Telltale Walking Dead game. I did never play the games after that. The end of Metal Gear Solid 4, even though that game is a mess. I knew what was coming in Mass Effect 3 and I was still mad when I played it. Favorite Lovecraft story? At the Mountains of Madness, but Innsmouth is a close second. I hope Del Toro gets to make his movie. Excited for Elite Dangerous Space Legs? I'm interested, but honestly my hopes aren't too high. I'm going to go in expecting Rovers 2.0 and not a Star Citizen competitor. I've been wrong plenty of times before though, so I guess we'll see. I'll see you next time.